For the first time in 50 years, Campbell's iconic soup can looked different in 2021. Even though the changes are subtle, it makes the can feel
like one that feels at home in your pantry versus one that you remember seeing in grandma's or granddad's pantry.
Good.
So let's break down Campbell's first major rebrand in decades, and how those small changes are breathing new life into soup, the company's core product. The redesign is so slight that customers might not have even noticed it.
It was really important here that Campbell's did this evolutionary change, didn't step away from their iconic look and feel.
This is Rob Meyerson, the founder of brand strategy firm Heirloom. He's been studying Campbell's redesign for a new edition of the book Designing Brand Identity. Though Campbell's Soup Company makes more than just soup, its namesake product has been on shelves for 130 years. The label has been tweaked many times since then, but only significantly redesigned a handful of times. Like in 1898, when the company first chose the colors that would define it.
The red and white on the can, which is inspired by the Cornell football team's uniforms.
That red and white wasn't touched in the new redesign, but other elements were tweaked. For example, the new logo gets rid of the drop shadow and disconnects the letters.
Drop shadows are a little bit of a relic of an era in design where adding dimension was seen as a positive. Removing any unnecessary components like that subtle drop shadow just puts all the more focus on the recognizable assets.
The overall effect is a simpler, more modern take on the logo, and modernizing is a theme throughout the redesign.
The medallion, they retained all of the text and basically the same imagery within the medallion, but they added some dimension to it that looks a little bit more 3D. It pops a little bit more, it feels brighter on the can. The word soup has been written in a different color. They've gone from a serif typeface, which has these little feet and pieces on the bottom of the P, for example, and they've gone to what's called sans serif, without a serif, and that's typically a little bit more modern. They also retained this slant on the interior of the O. And so I think this is just striking a balance between modernizing, refreshing, but keeping some recognizability between the old can and the new can.
The company did add something new, a picture of each soup's ingredients.
They wanted to emphasize the food ingredients in the can.
Aaron Back is a Wall Street Journal columnist who covers all things Campbell's.
This is about reaching young people who care about food quality, who care about what they're feeding their kids, and saying, look, there's real tomatoes in this.
And there's another benefit to those pictures.
Instead of using a picture of a bowl of soup or a spoon holding soup, they've gone with just this simple shot of the ingredients, the piece of chicken and the noodles, and that alone makes them stand out from everybody else in the space.
So why did the company go through all this trouble for a redesign so subtle?
The last thing you want to do is make it so that people don't recognize your cans or your products.
And that Campbell's can was already so recognizable, and had been for decades. It was memorialized by Andy Warhol, and in catchy ads.
Campbell's tomato soup, good.
For a long time, Campbell's iconic status translated into very strong sales. Around the turn of this century, that came to an end and they started running into problems.
Soup sales began a steady decline for years.
The overwhelming perception among young consumers is that Campbell's soups were old-fashioned, unhealthy, out of style, and unappealing.
Changing that was part of CEO Mark Clouse's new strategy to prioritize soups, after years of expanding beyond it. Some of that expansion worked. Campbell's snack division now accounts for nearly half of the company's sales. But fresh foods, like baby carrots and salsa, were less successful. The company ultimately sold its entire refrigerated food unit in 2019.
The insight of the new management was, look, the name of the company is Campbell Soup Company. It's our most important product.
So the company tried to appeal to younger consumers by refreshing both the label and the recipes.
They took out high fructose corn syrup from the condensed soup line. The cream of mushroom, cream of chicken soups now have more fresh cream in them.
The company also tried new marketing, like sponsoring an episode of Top Chef,
I'm gonna do a Swiss chard gratin.
making an NFT, and partnering with the Madden NFL game. And so far, it's helped. Soup sales have grown in recent years. That's in part due to the pandemic, when more people were cooking at home. But those lockdown customers stuck around.
Campbell, not too long ago was viewed as one of the most troubled of the major food brands, but last year as one of the top performers. Stock went up 31%, and that was in an overall down year for the stock market.
Still, the future of growth for Campbell's isn't just in soup. It's snacks. The company designates that division's role as accelerated growth. But it was important for Campbell's to staunch its core product's bleeding.
Once you clean up the product and also make the label look more appealing, what you do is you kind of give a permission structure. That's something you can maybe even be excited about, to have a can of Campbell's tomato soup in your pantry.